Our cultural stigmas can stand in the way of a healthy mind. Welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Break. Vanessa Yang joins me to talk about the impact cultural taboos and stigmas have on the mental health of culturally diverse communities. Hi, I'm Dr. Nafisa Sikandri, a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in anxiety-based disorders. I created the Mental Health Break podcast to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you prioritize your mental health. Mental illness can cost you time and money. Ignoring your symptoms will only make the problems worse. Taking time out of your busy day to dedicate to improving your mental health can lead to long-term health and wellness. In this podcast, each week you'll learn tips, tricks, and proven strategies to help you regain control of your life, all while prioritizing your mental health. If you want to improve your life, regain control of your mental health, and feel empowered, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Today's episode is brought to you by the Transforming Anxiety course, an online, self-paced anxiety course to help you manage and control your anxiety from the comfort, privacy, and convenience of your own home. Learn how to transform your anxiety in just 6 short weeks. Course registration is now open. To learn more, visit transforminganxiety.com/course. Vanessa Yang is the CEO and founder of First Mentor Street, a mentorship program for youth where she teaches kids life skills and general knowledge to gain a head start in life. Her vision through First Mentor Street is for teens and young adults to have a chance to avoid pitfalls and take a Ferrari to adulthood instead of a skateboard. Vanessa is also a CPA and graduated with a degree in business administration with an option in accounting as an international student from Germany. She has also completed a certification in holistic nutrition. Hi, Vanessa. Thank you so much for being here and joining us on this podcast interview.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the invitation.
So I briefly shared a little bit about your background and just your expertise. So can you tell me a little bit more about what you do and the people that you serve?
Sure. So I actually came from a corporate world. I spent over 15 or 20 years in corporate America as a CPA and as an accountant. And I felt all these years working all these hours, it was just not very personally rewarding. So I decided to, and I have done a search for quite some time just to figure out what I want to do next. And something has just been tugging at me all along. And when COVID hit in 2020, it really gave me the opportunity to kind of revisit my life, see what I wanted to do. And I finally decided just to start my own business. And I have been mentoring for many years, whether it's somebody from a college level or entry level professionals or even professionals at work that I have been supporting. And I really enjoy mentorship. And as my kids are growing up and I'm trying to raise them to the best way I can, right? I realized there's really a big gap between what they're learning in school, which are a lot of technical skills, and what I would like for them to have, which is missing basically a lot of soft skills, people skills, life skills, general knowledge. And that's why I decided to start a business just around that to teach teens and young adults exactly that type of information. And my very first platform will be a podcast as well, which I'm hoping to launch sometimes in March 2021.
Oh, wonderful. That's so great that you're working with teens. Like it is. I hear so many adults complaining that they didn't get the life lessons that they needed as teenagers, and they learned a lot of things that they probably are never going to use. So it's great that you're doing that.
Yes, thank you. I feel like there's a need because as I've been talking to friends throughout the years, I had several business ideas. I'm in that sense, I'm pretty creative. Ideas come to me. And this was the one that resonated with most people. All the other ideas were like, oh, this is great. But when I came up with this proposal specifically, everybody was like, I would get that for my children. So I had the feeling there was really a need out there.
Wow, that's really wonderful. Today we're talking about cultural taboos, and I know in my culture there's a huge stigma towards mental health and mental illness. And can you tell me about your experience in your culture with mental health stigma and how it impacted you?
Yes. So my background is, I would say, bicultural. I'm Asian. I was born in Asia and raised by an Asian family, but I was actually raised in Germany in a Western society. So there's been two parts, but because my family and now living in the US, I've been surrounded by more Asians. I would say I'm more familiar with the Asian, the way they think about mental health. And it's really a taboo as well. We don't talk about it. When you talk about how you're doing, how's your health, it's all about the physical health. And I feel like from an Asian society perspective, we expect a lot from our children. There's a lot of comparisons. I remember when I was growing up, my mom would always compare me with her friend's daughter or her friend's son. Look at this person, they're so and so. So it's put a lot of pressure on you as a child to really perform. I mean, you've heard of the term tiger mom, and I feel like sometimes I can't help it, but I'm one myself. But I try to really tone it down a little bit. And yes, the expectations are there, but also provide the support. And from our culture, we don't talk about mental health at all. It's not discussed, it doesn't exist. I think that's to the extent of the taboo. And I actually had somebody on my podcast who is a relative of ours who's a pediatrician. And we spoke specifically about mental health because that's what she helps kids with. And overall, she agreed with me too that in our culture, it's just a topic we don't discuss. And as a result, parents don't know red flags. So when something happens with their kids, they don't even realize. They just say, oh, this kid is changing. This child is just becoming out of control, so unappreciative. And we don't see the telltale signs, unfortunately.
What culture specifically are you from in the Asian culture?
I'm Chinese, so but I think this is pretty common across a lot of Asian cultures.
Right, right. I mean, I'm right next door in Afghanistan, so I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're considered Asian, and it's the same taboo. I mean, I was discouraged from even studying and studying psychology and becoming a mental health professional. So unfortunately, the stigma is pretty deep. But also, there's another component to the Asian culture, especially the model minority status that's often associated with Asians. And so, how has that affected your own mental and emotional development growing up?
I feel like growing up, seeing somebody cry or when I was crying, it was considered a weakness, right? As an adult, as I've been reading a lot of health and development books, I've learned it's actually not a weakness. It's a great way for your body to release stress and for you just to let it out. And normally when I cry personally, I feel much better afterwards. But otherwise, I would say it's just a lot of pressure to be there, to always be on your ball game, always perform at the highest level. You can't really complain. You can't tell your parents how you feel because they won't understand.
So, did you struggle at all with anxiety or stress or depression or anything like that? How did you deal with that if you did?
Yes, growing up, I felt my fair share. What happened was when I was growing up in Germany, my parents had a business. It was a restaurant. So unlike the other kids, after school, I actually had to throw out my backpack and right away started working. And I understand as an immigrant family, this is not uncommon. And I'm not ungrateful. I actually thought it was a really great way of teaching me how to balance my time and really learning to contribute to the family at a young age. But it was quite stressful to really be a top A student at school and at the same time work while my friends get to hang out and party. But I did my fair share of hanging out and partying too, but after midnight. So everything became really late growing up. I finished the restaurant work at 11 or midnight and then went out with my friends afterwards.
Well, I used to work in the Fremont School District in California, and we had a huge Chinese population. In one of the schools, it was the best school in that area, and it was very intense, and it felt like a college atmosphere. And a lot of the Asians were committing suicide, and it just broke my heart that that's what their only option was because the intense pressure of doing really well and getting the straight A's because that's in a way expected of Asians in a school setting, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in your work with youth, do you notice that or do you work with them at all on better coping strategies than resorting to suicide because of the intense pressure?
I personally don't because I'm not a mental health professional from that perspective, but I've read a lot of articles because I live in Los Angeles in an area with a big Asian population. So we have a lot of schools and high schools, particularly with a lot of Asians. And I've came across a lot of articles similar to what you said. There is a suicide rate. I don't know what the rate is, but there have been cases of Asians just collapsing under the pressure. They just couldn't handle it, and suicide was the only other option, which is very, very unfortunate. And what I've learned, especially with my interview from the pediatrician, one thing she mentioned and suggested was to have the kids starting a journal, right? To really write down on a daily basis how you feel, what has happened in a day, because journaling is a great way of coping, I would say. And especially if you review your journal, let's say once a week, you look at everything you've written down. And right, as an adult too, at the moment when things happen, we are really frustrated. It just creates emotional rage. But when you look at it from a distance, several days later, a month later, it's not that big of a deal anymore. It was just the emotions coming in at that very moment. So really reviewing things, writing things down. And as a teenager, that was my coping mechanism as well. I had a diary. So I would write all my feelings and emotions down, and it felt so much better. As an adult, I have friends now that I know I can trust. And those are the people that I talk to. I had my own pressure at work at one time. We probably could get into that a little bit later. But I would really say find somebody that you trust and just talk to them. Just have a person who can be there for you. It's such a relief. You don't have to feel like you're by yourself.
Well, I was an immigrant. I came here at the age of 9, and I had a lot of difficulty transitioning and adjusting to this culture and not having any role models. And also I came with my cousin. So we were all started at 10 on down. And so we were the oldest. Like I was 9, my sister was 10, and then my other cousin was 8. And the rest of them were younger than us. And so we were the trailblazers, I guess. We were the ones that kind of paved the way for the rest of them, but we didn't know what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And I had a really difficult time with, I became intensely shy when I came to this country, and it was very difficult. We didn't speak the language. I didn't like the judgment. And so I didn't have that outlet as far as talking to people. And I didn't even know anything about psychology or mental health until I went to college. But in 7th grade, my teacher gave us a journal assignment, and that changed my world. It was for an assignment for school. We were supposed to write something just generic, but I remember falling in love with it, and I continued to journal. And to this day, I journal, and it was a lifesaver for me. Looking back on some of the intense thoughts that I thought, oh my gosh, these are such horrible thoughts that I'm having as a teenager. Looking back on it, they were so innocent, and they were they were so minor, but at that time I thought it was the biggest horrible thing that I could have gone through. But that journaling gave me perspective, like you said. And you don't necessarily even have to read it until years later.
Yes,
but just the act of putting it down makes us feel that emotional separation, right? That we don't have to.
You're putting the burden out of you. You kind of push it into the world versus keeping everything inside of you.
And that's the whole goal, is to get it outside of you, because I see all these emotions just going around and around inside our body, and we're losing perspective and reality as far as like what is really going on until you put it down on paper. And you don't have to keep it. You can shred it. You can burn it. You can, because I know that a lot of people are afraid that people are going to read their journal. And I actually had people that were reading my journal, and I got clever in that I would write, I know you're reading this journal, but I'm going to write all this down.
I did that too. I think the only person I was afraid of reading my journal was my younger brother. So what I did, because in Europe, you learn multiple languages. So I put my journal, I wrote it in a mixture of German, French, a little bit of Latin, and whatever languages I learned, I just mixed it all up thinking, okay, my parents for sure won't understand it. And my brother was a few years behind me, so he hasn't learned some of the languages yet. So I felt somewhat safe.
Yeah, it's so sad that we have to write in code, but for some of my patients, even the adults, I say even if you sit next to a shredder, just write everything down and then shred it all down the shredding machine. It
I like
doesn't
that.
matter. It has to come out of you. That's the whole goal. It has to come out of you. Doesn't matter how you do it.
Yes, great one.
Yeah, and just hoping that if there are any Asian teens or any teen that's really feeling overwhelmed, that feel like I can't handle this, just please pick up a journal. Another thing that really helped me was reading. I would read about other people's lives because my
Yes.
life back in Afghanistan was gone. I no longer could connect and relate to that. And my life in America was very foreign. I couldn't understand what some of these people were doing, what some of these people were saying. We didn't have the right clothes, we didn't have the right mannerisms. And I learned by reading these teen books about how to behave, what to say, and I observed other people. And I literally, like, we eat with a spoon, like we put the rice in the spoon and then we shove it with a fork. And then I would see Americans eating with a fork, and I was like, I don't even know how to do that. That's so weird. Let me figure that out. So observation is another thing that we can do, but it's just when you don't have I get a lot of messages from teens that their parents don't believe in therapy, that they're not giving them permission to go seek therapy. So it's a matter of giving them some of these coping mechanisms, coping strategies until they can go and find somebody and talk to them.
Yes. And you made a really good point. I mean, besides journaling, the second one would be really reading or looking for somebody out there, even though you don't know that person directly, whether it's an idol or somebody you look up to, and mimic them, right? Especially to your point, when you're an immigrant and you feel like you don't fit in, how do other people's do it? And reading books are a great idea because many times if you pick up somebody who's been there, you feel like you're not alone, right? Somebody who's been there where you're at right now, and 10 years, 20 years down the road, look at where they're at right now. You kind of feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It gives you hope. And I think hope is such an important factor because at the very moment, to your point, when it happens to us, we feel like this is the only thing. It's so important and there's no way out. There's no better tomorrow. But when you look at it in hindsight, later on, it was very innocent and not as important. But for you at that very moment, it's important. And I want to encourage teenagers listening to you, don't give up, right? I was at times in my life where I was frustrated because I felt like when I was younger, my parents didn't understand me. I was working hard at school. I was working at the restaurant. It was just no time for myself. And really just knowing there will be a day when you have a little bit more of a say into your life and how you can change it around, and don't give up quite yet.
Oh, I love that. And make sure that it's a real positive role model that you're following that
Yes.
can guide you. During my time, what I'm really grateful for is we had those MTV behind the music or entertainment behind the story. Like it would talk about these celebrities and how the struggles they went through and how they overcame them and became the person they were. And that really spoke to me because that gave me the idea that this isn't permanent. This isn't who I'm supposed to be forever. I will evolve. I will get better, and life will get better as I got older. And it's a matter of seeing that other people struggle as well, and the obstacles can actually make you a better person, can give you the strength to move forward in your life. But when you're a teenager, you can't see past your own issues, right?
No, you can't. And that's why I am such a huge fan of growth and development books. I've been reading a lot in this area, but not until I was in my early 20s. Somebody gave me a book, and I think, actually, I have to take a step back. In college, I'm dating myself right now, but somebody had Tony Robbins tapes, and my friend gave it to me, and I had no clue who Tony Robbins was, but I was really fascinated by the program, like his energy, the way he spoke. And there were simple tips and tricks he gave us. Let's say a posture. I remember that clearly. When you're sad and depressed, your body posture, right? Your shoulders are down, your head's down, your eyes is down. But when you just change a simple thing like your posture, they call it the power posture, or like the Wonder Woman posture of your girl, right? Just stand straight up with your head up, and then put both of your hands to the hips. Just changing that one simple thing can change your status and the way you're thinking right away. And when he said that on the tapes, I was like, I don't think so. So I tried it out one time and it actually really worked. And then the other thing was, in my early 20s, when I started becoming a working professional, somebody gave me another book, which was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And that one really lit fire under me to say, oh my God, there's something else out there besides just being a hard worker. I could create passive income, meaning I could find ways to make money for me. And that really gave me this idea of what else can I do in life? I mean, it really lit a fire in me, and I kept reading over the years. So I would really encourage you to read, because it gives you such a different perspectives. It lights a fire under you, and to help you look for the goods, right? You can focus on different things in life. And if you always think about why me, why does this happen to me all the time, which I used to think a lot too, and sometimes I still do, but I keep now telling myself. And another tip is really practicing gratefulness. That's something I've been working on. Besides keeping a journal about how you feel, maybe you can start the practice of daily gratefulness. Write down 5 things that you are really grateful for. It might feel a little unsincere at the first time, or you don't know what to write, but just simple things like, I'm still alive, I'm still breathing, right? I'm healthy, I have a roof under me, other people might not have this. So practice daily what to be grateful for, because the next day you're gonna have to think about, oh my God, what do I have to write about? So as you live your day, you're gonna start paying attention about what you're grateful for. So maybe just in the beginning to make sure you have something to write about tomorrow. But if you continue focusing on all the positives, your behavior and your attitude will change, and that will help you as well.
That's such a good point. And when you were talking about the power pose, this is, I think, a lot of, I say this to a lot of my patients, that they don't even realize how much 70% of our communication is nonverbal. So even when you're applying for a job and you're sitting there all slouched on your phone and you're not paying attention and you're making yourself as small as possible, when that person comes out to interview you, they're going to take notice of that body posture. And they might even knock some points away from you for that, because you're not appearing confident. And
Yes.
and it releases testosterone when you do that power pose, when you stand like the Wonder Woman. But making sure that when you're at a job interview, to sit up, be alert, be ready to be interviewed, instead of making yourself really small, it makes a really big difference in how people perceive you. Because all interaction, people make a judgment the first 5 seconds, right? And if they see you as small and not very confident, then they might not think you're a good fit for that job. And then you were talking about just the gratitude journal. It really does rewire your brain. It made a huge difference for me, because if you do 3 to 5 different things that you're grateful for every single day, and initially it could be my parents, my health, my home, whatever. And then after a while, you're forced, like you said, to look for other things like, wow, that sunset was amazing, or that bird was really beautiful, or that little flower that I saw was really amazing.
Yes.
It brings it down to the tiniest little things, and then it rewires your brain from a negative mindset to a more positive mindset.
Yes. And if you're reshifting your focus. One thing I've learned is I'm quite a goal-oriented person, and I'm a planner. So what I do, and there's so many different things you can do. I do a lot. But at the end of the year, before a new year starts, try to create a vision board. That's something I've started doing with my family, with my own children. Come December, I'm like, make everybody sit down and write a vision board. And you can do it in different ways, but if you want to make it fun and creative, you could either cut out newspaper pictures. Well, we don't read newspaper or magazines, or even just go online and find some pictures that you find, like you stare at this beautiful beach, right? Maybe vacation and traveling is one of your goals. I cut out beach pictures because I love the beach. Or this dream house that you want to have one day, because then you kind of get an idea, your vision about life, like this is what I want to achieve one day. So you kind of rewire and refocus your brain and your goals on your goals specifically. That way you can only think about one thing at a time. So you cannot be positive and negative at the same time, right? So if you kind of condition yourself just to focus on the positive, what you want, and then go after your goals, there's no time for you to think about negativity. But of course, I understand things are not perfect, so you kind of have to reel yourself in all the time. But just keep practicing it. It might be a little bit challenging in the beginning, but over time, things just get better.
That's such a good point. I'm glad you brought up vision boards. When I worked in the prison with kids, I worked in a prison, state prison, for kids 14 to 25. And a lot of them were in there for either they were sex offenders or substance abuse, or some of them were there for murder and other gang activity. But when I introduced the vision boards, a lot of these kids just lit up. They just loved the idea of planning a future and seeing themselves. And I was saying, I brought in magazines, old magazines that cut up whatever really speaks to you, put it on this vision board. And that was such a positive activity for them. And I know vision boards have really manifested a lot of great things for me. Things that I never would have thought would happen. I just put them together, and then I just kind of opened up my brain opened up to that possibility and attracted me to that situation.
Yes.
But I also, every year at the beginning of the year, I write, or in December, I like to reflect on my year and then write my goals. And I like to break them down in 5 areas, like my personal, my health, my relationships, finances, my career, and just write what I'd like to see the following year. And it's always nice in December to reflect back on what I've accomplished and then looking forward about where I want to go. So those are all really good points that you brought up too.
Yes, I think that's really important for you just to focus on goals. But the other area I want to bring up is exercise, because that has helped me a lot. When we first started the pandemic, it was challenging because our family's always out and about, especially me. I'm a people person. I'm always out meeting people, catching up, learning things, and being cooped up at the house with everybody, on school, at work, was really, really challenging for me. And after like a month or two, I started seeing the telltale signs of slight depression again, because I've been through it before. And those manifested in getting a little bit, like having a hard time sleeping. I normally hit the pillow and a few minutes later I am gone, but I couldn't sleep. And I started realizing I became emotional again, more than normal. And those were signs to me that, something is going down the wrong path again. And when you realize that, for me, I didn't want it to go further. And I was looking for things and ways to make it better. And I read somewhere exercise, right? Because it releases happy hormones. And I said to myself, you know what? I've gained some weight anyways by sitting at home. So I need to start moving. And one goal I made myself at that point was to exercise minimum 30 minutes each day and to walk over 10,000 steps each day, no matter what. And I'm so grateful for my little Apple Watch, because it really has those 3 circles that I'm watching like a hawk. I want to make sure they close every day. One is to tell me how many calories I burned a day. And then the second one is, did I finish my exercise, which I set for a 30-minute goal. And the third one is standing, because just to stand up. And then there's also an indicator of how many steps I took each day. So focusing on that every day, no matter what it was, whether I just walk in the backyard, I just find some really old DVDs or go on YouTube for exercise videos, right? It doesn't have to be going to the gym or something elaborate, but just to making sure you move, you do something. It has really helped me feel better, more balanced as a person. And at the same time, shed some of the weight that I gained. So I was happy about that. And now, I think it's been since May 2020. It's almost a year, not quite yet. I have hardly, maybe just once I missed that goal. But other than that, every single day. That has really, so I noticed exercise really works. Somebody has been telling me for years I should do it, but somehow I just couldn't keep it up. I exercised a few days. I didn't enjoy it. And I dropped it. a year later, I tried it again, but for some reason this time, because I'm home more than ever, it has stuck. So I'm glad for that.
That's so important because COVID has made everything just turned upside down, right? And a lot of kids are not getting enough exercise, they're not moving, and so a lot of them are very depressed. They're missing the social connection, but they're also
Yes.
not moving. And the same thing with a lot of adults. Our structure has completely gone out the window. We're not sleeping when we're supposed to sleep. We're not eating the things we're supposed to eat, and we're not exercising. So adding that to a goal is really important. But going back to the cultural taboos, I know that, like for me, I had to become an adult and make this decision and make it okay for me to actually go to a therapist. I know that a lot of the parents, the Afghan families, aren't necessarily supportive of their kids going to therapy. I'm sure it's the same issue with the Asian cultures. Are there any advice you would have to people that actually want to get mental health support? Because sometimes your friends aren't enough, right? You have to go
Yeah.
talk to somebody that's detached and objective about your situation. Any advice you can give as to how we can overcome the cultural taboos and stigmas in our cultures?
That's a challenging one, but I feel like as our parents now become maybe as parents, right? You're not maybe the parents were first generation immigrants, and if they've been educated in college and they have a professional careers, they are a little bit more understanding than, for example, my parents' generation. They probably won't understand that at all. But for me, if my kids will come to me one day and say, "Mommy, I need help," I would say really sit down with your parents and have a really honest conversation and make the time, because sometimes we all are so busy with our own things. The kids have their own school activities and the homework and what have you, and the parents are busy with work and trying to, even they have problems themselves too. They might not admit it to you, but be very serious and ask them, "Mom or Dad, I need to talk to you," and just be very serious and sincere about that. I feel like as a family, we don't talk enough. We might be eating and watching TV or playing games, but being that honest conversation is so helpful, because your parents might not realize how bad the situation is, right? You just have to confide in them. You might think they don't understand you, but just remember, deep down, they really love you. And if you tell them there's something important and you're hurting, they should listen. Now, from a cultural perspective, some might not understand, some might not listen, but I would not give up in seeking help. Maybe you have a school counselor that could understand the situation. Now, I didn't go to school here, not until college, but I was taught that the school counselor could be the first person to help you, because they are more professional than your parents, and they could probably put you in different directions as far as who to speak to. The other thing is, I've learned that when you go for your annual checkup with your pediatrician, there's actually a survey that they give you. And it asks you questions such as, how have you felt the last 2 weeks, right? Are you not sleeping well? How are you eating? And be very, very honest in that survey, because this is what your doctor will use to evaluate your mental condition. And if necessary, talk to your pediatrician privately. I know your parents are most likely with you, but based on the interview I had recently, I've learned that the pediatrician sometimes would, if they notice, oh, there's a problem based on the survey and your answers, they would ask to speak to you first and ask for your permission later on to speak to your parents. But maybe you don't want to talk to your parents about that, then use your pediatrician as somebody to trust, and your pediatrician could probably give you guidelines on how to, what steps to take on next.
That's so good, because a lot of people don't really know who to talk to. And it could be your doctor, it could be your school counselor, it could be your teacher. For me, I look back on some of the papers that I've written.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to, for my creative writing class in college, I used to put down some of the stuff that I was struggling with, and I would write a paper about it.
Oh,
It was
great
my
one.
way of actually asking for help. And I had no idea that that's what I was doing at that time, but I guess that's what I was doing. And I would create these stories about the stuff that I was struggling with. And that made it normal for me to, once I saw it on paper, it made it easier for me to actually talk about it with people. I don't think these professors ever understood that that's what I was doing. They just thought it was a story. But the more I wrote about what I was really dealing with, even if it was in a third person or pretending it was about somebody else, it normalized it and made it easier for me to talk about it to other people. And I think this is why psychology spoke to me so much, because all of a sudden I started understanding my issues more, and I started to put it in the context of, this is normal. These are what teenagers go through. This is what you go through as an immigrant. This is what the acculturation process looks like. And this is why some people struggle. All of that made such a huge difference for me in understanding what I was going through and putting my problems in perspective.
Yes. And one suggestion I have is, if you don't have somebody in the family, your older cousin, your auntie or your uncle, somebody to speak to, because that's what I did, for example, for my nephews and nieces when they went through their teenage years. Because I'm like, yep, I remember, because you probably have issues with your parents or with school, but your parents don't understand you. So find a relative to talk to. But I wanted to bring up mentorship really quick. I interviewed somebody who was adopted, and she started an agency. She started a company called Mixed Roots, and it's really about diversity and about being adopted in a multicultural family or being multicultural yourself. And we bonded over mentorship, because she has mentored kids who felt like, I don't know where I belong, right? Especially if you've been adopted, you have the sense of abandonment, or you don't know who your birth parents are, and you just have all these questions and confusions. Having a mentor in a particular area that you struggle with, whether it's being an immigrant, whether it's your own identity, might be really helpful, again, to talk to somebody who's been through this journey, who had all these emotions that you've had. Now, I don't know all the organizations out there, but maybe now with the internet, you could Google a little bit and look for mentors in particular areas for the youth. And I'm sure you can find a nonprofit organization to help you out.
And for people that are connected with the church or with a temple or a mosque, or like I said, teachers, just keep talking until you find that person, knowing that there are other ways that you can get the help without, even if your parents aren't necessarily supportive of getting therapy. So knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell your younger self about just mental health, and then the taboos that you can overcome, and then mental health and well-being in general?
I would say that the most important part is really, it will get better. To me, that's very important, because I still remember those days of crying and frustrations and feeling helpless, alone, and nobody to talk to, and find somebody to talk to. I couldn't find somebody, so I used my diary as a form of releasing it. And if I'd known better, I would have started goal setting a little earlier to refocus. But to me, it's like, don't give up. That's the message I really want to put out to the kids. Do not give up. Life is so precious. A lot of people fight for survival, right? Especially during COVID, there have just been too many tragedies. So appreciate what you have, which is your life and your health. Look for some help, even though it seems very daunting and frustrating at the point, but never give up.
Never give up. That's so true. And the life you're living now is not going to be the life you're going to live 10 years from now. It can definitely get better. Just keep focusing on that. Do your vision board, create the person you want to become, write your goals, all of that. Very good points.
Yes. And I would say, just keep learning, be curious, learn. And that's what I created. I hope that's okay that I mentioned my podcast really quick.
No, I wanted to actually ask you, where can people find you, and then tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah. So overall, I feel like that's what I created. My podcast that's going to come up soon. I'm just waiting. Overall, it's really to keep learning, to be curious, and find ways to see what else is out there, right? And that for me to create the podcast is really discussing things that kids, or I should say teens, because my teen daughter does not like me calling her a kid, but young adults and teens, for them to learn what's out there and that others struggle just like you. You're not alone. And I've created different topics about different things I feel like you need to learn that is not being taught at school. It could be a variety of things from personal finance to health and wellness, and that includes mental health, and also growth and development, vision boarding, setting goals. I cover all of those topics, and also how to prepare for your career. I liked how you earlier mentioned about interview. That's actually one of the topics I just finished talking about, resume and interview skills. And so hopefully it will be out soon. But in the meantime, you could follow me on Instagram, First Mentor Street. So first is the number 1 ST, and then Mentor Street, where I will update and see. So this way you can see when the podcast will finally be launched.
What is your podcast called?
First Mentor Podcast.
First Mentor. So it's the number 1 ST and then Mentor Podcast.
Yes.
Okay. I'll share all of this in the show notes so that people can find you and link to you. And maybe follow your podcast, especially a lot of teens that are listening and they need somebody. There's a video of this man on YouTube that put up the video of basic life skills that he wanted to teach young kids, like how to tie a tie, how to change a tire, how to change the oil in your car, how to do basic grooming, things that kids need. Like this was all aimed for boys. And this guy just started putting this as a dad. He started putting these videos out there, and it's like now got over 1 million views, if not more.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I think kids are looking for that. And so for nowadays with YouTube and with TikTok and all social media, kids can get more information, but just keep looking and keep finding the positive things, not the negative, because there's also a lot of negative on social media.
Yes, very true.
So look for the positive. Well, thank you so much for joining me and being here and having this conversation with me. I think it's important for us to talk about it, and hopefully somebody can benefit from the information we talked about today.
Yes, I really appreciate you having me on, and I wanted to make sure that they don't feel like they're alone. So thanks so much for bringing this up.
Yes, hope is the word, right?
Yes, thank you.
Cultural taboos related to mental health and well-being exist in many cultures, but that doesn't mean you have to perpetuate it. You can end the stigma by reaching out and prioritizing your mental health and then helping someone else get the help that they need. As Vanessa said, never give up. To learn more about Vanessa, visit transforminganxiety.com/40. When you're there, go ahead and leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts about this episode. If you haven't already, you can show support for the Mental Health Break podcast by subscribing wherever you're tuning in from today. We have some great interviews lined up, and you don't want to miss a single episode. Subscribe today so you get notified when new episodes drop. I can't wait to see you here next week. Same time, same place. Bye for now.